The visa officers become skeptical at that time. They start thinking that this person is coming with an intention that that person will never return to his home country. Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Sajjad Malik. I'm a business and immigration lawyer, a barrister and solicitor in Ontario, Canada, and I'm speaking to you from my office in Oakville. Today I have chosen a basic topic, and that basic topic is temporary resident visas, and again within temporary resident visas, visitor visas, the visas which you request to come to Canada to visit your friends, your relatives, sightseeing, tourism, some other kind of business exploratory activities in Canada. Now these visitor visas are the easiest visas because they are easy to apply and everyone thinks that they can apply for these visas. These visas, on the other hand, are sometimes the most difficult visas because there are people who have very strong cases. There are people who think that they have done everything right and they're refused because there's a huge discretion involved in these visas. And when you take things for granted, when you take things easy, when you think it's like this, you could do it, that's the time when you may be faltering and you may not be putting in the enough effort which is required to do these visas. We regularly help our clients in temporary resident visas, but our fees are higher because we put in 15, 20, sometimes 25 hours of work in preparing these temporary resident visa applications, because there's a high risk in certain cases that those cases would be refused, and if they are refused, they could only be challenged in the Federal Court of Canada. When you have submitted an inadequate application to the visa officer and it is refused, you go to the federal court. Even the federal court would not entertain that application because you haven't met the burden, the onus of proving that you were eligible to apply for those visas. Now, without any further ado, I'll come right on the temporary resident visas. As the name indicates, these are temporary resident visas. They are temporary in nature. They give you the opportunity to reside in Canada for a temporary period of time. These temporary visas could be up to 10 years of duration. If your passport has 10 years validity on it and you apply properly with 10 years of valid passport, you are approved. You may be able to come to Canada multiple times, provided you have applied for a multiple entry visit or temporary resident visa for a visitor. Now, what does the government look at? What does the visa officer look at when they are processing these visas? There are several things, multiple things which they look at. But the first and foremost things, if we break it down into 5 to 7 things, number one, what's the purpose of coming to Canada? Your purpose should be a strong, logical purpose in your circumstances. So if you are someone who's telling the visa officer that you are a tourist and you wish to come to Canada for sightseeing, tourism and everything, and you're already 40 years old, you have never visited out of your home country, you have no demonstrated history of travel or tourism in your past, you have not even gone to the best tourist places in your home country, then how would you convince the visa officer that you have decided to come to Canada, which is 20 hours flight from your country, where you're spending $10,000-$15,000 on this trip? You are a tourist and $10,000-$15,000 was all you had at that time. The visa officers become skeptical at that time. They start thinking that this person is coming with an intention that that person will never return to his home country. That's why he's posing as a tourist, while this is not genuine intention. It could be refused. So choose a purpose which is commensurate with your circumstances. Choose a purpose which sounds logical, which appears logical, and not only sounds or appears logical, but you have the substantial documentation to back that purpose. So purpose is number one. Number two, how well established you are in your home country. How much income are you earning in your home country? How much properties, assets do you have in your home country? Are you someone who is very well established in the home country, highly employable? You have been on a job for several years. You have family, you have property, you have social connections, you have a career pathway there. Yes, In that case, you may be able to show that your ties back home are strong. But if you're someone who doesn't have a job, who has a job which is only 2 years old, there's no demonstrated history of employment, your income is meager, you have never visited another country, there's no family, most of your family is based in Canada, then they may say that your ties back home are weak and your ties in Canada are strong, so that pull factor will pull you to Canada and you may not like to return to Canada. So second factor, keep a focus on your ties back home and provide as much evidence as possible to demonstrate that you are well settled, well integrated, you have a nice career, you have strong pull factors back in your home country. Number 3, what is your travel history? Though it may not be determinative for grant of visit visas or temporary resident visas, but it plays an important role. If you have been to another country, another Western country, UK or USA or another European country, and you had that history that you went to that country and then you returned within the validity of your visa or granted stay, it shows that yes, you are someone whom Canadian government could also trust and they could grant you the visa because you have a demonstrated history of not overstaying in a country which trusted you earlier. If you don't have any history, don't worry about it. Try to produce an evidence and provide them some kind of logic or a statement where you could explain why you haven't been abroad. You may be a young person who was too much engaged in the studies and then initial career you didn't get an opportunity to travel first. Now document it in your documentation. In the travel history part of your cover letter, explain all that why weren't you able to come here. Now one more factor, where and who would finance your trip to Canada? Do you have enough liquidity? Do you have enough money? Which sounds logical. As I said earlier, if you have only $10,000 of saving over 10 years, who spends that $10,000 for a single trip of 10-15 days? So you have to think logically, put yourself in the officer's shoes and think that if there's someone who is coming with all his savings to be spent in 15 days, would that person do it? Logically, normally people don't do it. Yes, there could be rare instances in which someone could do it. But you have to keep in mind that you are financially well established, your savings you have are enough to cover your trip, and you're not doling out or spending all the whole life saving in a single trip because then it doesn't appeal the logic. So that's another way of establishing that you are a genuine visitor and coming here. So if you have a strong purpose, strong ties back home, demonstrated history of travel and compliance with the immigration authorities, you have a logical purpose which seems logical, you have someone who has invited you from Canada and you have that attraction, you have a brother or your mother, your father, your sister, your in-laws who are inviting you, that could be a genuine purpose, but you have to demonstrate it very well. So just one more thing, keep in your mind the circumstances of every person, they differ. So there are checklists available, you have to stick to those checklists. That is the minimum documentation which you have to provide to them. Not only the basic checklist, but the checklist which is specific for your visa office. Stick to those documents, provide them. And in addition to that, the burden lies on you to demonstrate that you are eligible for a work visa and provide any other evidence which strengthens your case, which is above and beyond the minimum checklist available to you. So if you have any questions, if you have a history of repeated visa refusals, you're most welcome to get in touch.